As the government strives to meet its housing targets of 33,000 units per year, research by the Housing Commission says Ireland may need up to 62,000 homes in the coming years to meet demand. That's 62,000 every year. Now, that is an upper estimate. The lower estimate is 42,000 homes per year, but it's still significantly more than the Housing for All targets. So, what should the government do? Well, to get some insight into how the problem has arisen and how it might be solved, I'm joined by Conor O'Connell, Director of Housing and Planning at the Construction Industry Federation, and we hope to be joined by Eoin O'Broin, the Sinn Fein T.D. for Dublin Midwest and spokesperson on housing, local government and heritage in a little while. First of all, Conor, good morning.
Good morning, Pat. How are you?
What do you make of this research? Because it's based on a sort of a premise, and that is that there's a 200-year lifespan for existing homes. There will be falling household sizes, and therefore we will need, if we expand our households as we have been doing, 62,000 per year. But if we don't, 42,000 per year, and we're nowhere near that.
No, and housing supply and housing figures and housing demand can be a very controversial subject, but there's no doubt about it. All the indicators seem to be pointing that we need to deliver a lot more homes than maybe are planned for at the moment. Now, it's very difficult to be critical of the targets within Housing for All when we haven't quite yet reached 33,500 units per year. You know, it's estimated that we will reach 28,000 units in 2022, which is a significant increase on the year before. But however, we've had an extraordinary set of circumstances over the last number of years, Pat, in terms of inward immigration, in terms of household formation, in terms of a whole set of factors that have constrained and limited housing supply, such as material cost increases, COVID shutdowns, etc. So there's no doubt about it. We seem to need to be delivering a lot more than are planned for at the moment, and that obviously has significant follow-on implications then.
Now, there are a couple of roadblocks along the way. I mean, we know that, according to the latest figures, almost 29,000 housing units in large developments are awaiting permission from On Board Planola, and that board has had significant difficulties in recent times.
It is. The supply of housing just doesn't happen in isolation, Pat. The supply of housing depends on the supply of zoned land. It depends on the supply of infrastructure, mainly utilities to service that zoned land. You then need the supply of planning, and of course you need the supply of funding for affordable and viable product. They're the main factors that will deliver housing supply.
Okay, so if you look, we have enough zoned land, haven't we?
No, not at all. We would contend, and we've done reports on this, we're actually dezoning land at the moment in certain counties in Ireland that have high population growth. That as a result that we say of a flawed analysis through the National Planning Framework in relation to our population growth. Our population growth was determined at a time when we had very low population growth following the last recession. We welcome the recent announcements that there will be a review of the National Planning Framework, and we need to zone more land, Pat, in areas of high growth.
No, if you look at the reason obviously people are reluctant to zone more land is that there are planning permissions out there, and according to the stats again, of over 103,000 SHD units that were granted permission, almost 29,000 of those haven't started. You know, they're stopped. In other words, people, you're suspecting that they got planning permission to add value, and then they didn't bother building them because building is just too much trouble.
No, look, why would any builder at the moment, Pat, sit on a planning application that they could proceed with in a market of high demand with high price points? It makes absolutely no logical sense for anyone to sit on a planning permission that they could possibly deliver viably at the moment. The reason that some of those planning permissions are not being implemented is down to a number of factors, Pat, including viability. The cost of apartment construction in recent years has increased very significantly due to the material cost inflation, and that has impacted significantly on viability.
That's in the last year because of the war in Ukraine and the effect of energy prices and on everything from steel to timber and all the rest of it. I know the pandemic and some of the slowdown in delivery in the supply chain had some impact. But these planning permissions, many of them precede those difficulties. And still, when labour was cheaper and materials were cheaper, they weren't built.
Pat, I remember and recall doing reports into apartment viability in 2017, 2018, 2019. Apartment viability in particular, which would make up the vast number of units that may be held up at the moment due to viability issues, has always been very difficult. Now, that did change for a number of years when the International Real Estate Investment Trust came into this country and forward funded apartment schemes. But that was in certain locations where the yield for them was right and they could afford to fund it and build out those schemes. But certainly there was other areas, with suburban areas, where it was a lot more challenging to deliver apartments viably.
Why would someone, though, who understands all of this, and I don't think the construction industry is bereft of brains and intelligence in these matters, why would they get permission for things which, the CIF could have told that were non-viable? If you don't have the cash, in other words, and the big companies do have the cash, the Kearns Homes and people like that, they have the cash and they can do it. But the smaller guys can't. Maybe they're in the wrong business. If they don't have the resources to actually build schemes, maybe they are in the wrong business.
I think that's a bit unfair, Pat. You have many, many companies, a lot of the traditional family-owned companies that you're probably referring to there are actively delivering sites at the moment, are actively delivering homes. Many of them, because of the density guidelines, and this is a quite detailed technical area that can be difficult to explain at times, but the density guidelines of over 35 units per hectare in certain areas would require, depending on the type of site, may require you to lodge as part of an application, to lodge an application for apartments, which in many instances were very, very difficult to fund. It was easy in many instances for the builder to come along to show, because a builder has to go to a funder to show the project is viable. It's easy to show that the housing units in that particular site are viable, but maybe in the corner of that site where there was an apartment complex that was granted permission, it was more difficult to show to the funder that it was viable. And that is a big issue in many suburban areas.
The whole green agenda is about density and cramming as many people into shoeboxes as you possibly can so they can all take the bus or the bike. That's, to put it in a nutshell. Are you saying that really even the planners and the people, in the housing department, the ideologues, have got it wrong that, people still want houses if they can get them?
There's no doubt about it. There's a very, very strong demand for housing. And if you look at the statistics at the moment, it does seem that initiatives such as the First Home Scheme, the change to the macroprudential rules, the extension of the Help to Buy scheme, all government initiatives are yielding results in relation to, as you call it, your traditional homes market, your 3-bed semis, your 4-bed semis. There's strong demand, strong market. For apartments, maybe the market is a bit less unknown. But having said that, Pat, there is a need to develop more sustainably in Ireland along existing transport corridors. That doesn't necessarily have to mean apartments. If you look at the European models of high density development, you can achieve units of 35 to 50 to the hectare with own door units. And we understand that the design and density guidelines will be out for public consultation shortly. And that will facilitate more own door units where maybe in recent years, people may have applied for apartments to achieve that high density. Yeah. But now, in the future, hopefully there will be an opportunity for them to apply for more own-door type units.
Right. Now, go on, Con.
But just in relation to An Bord Pleanála, look, there is a real problem pattern. If we really want to up the supply of units, we do need to get extra resources into An Bord Pleanála urgently to free up the supply of planning.
Yeah, I mean, on board Planola is obviously reeling under the scandals that arose in that board. But when you talk about on board Planola, and I've talked to the minister about this, and he pledged that he would deliver on this when he's reforming the board, that a rules-based system where everybody knows where they stand would accelerate housing development. In other words, a developer knows the rules, knows how high he or she can go, knows how wide the road has to be, knows what infrastructure they have to put in, etc., etc., etc. And if your scheme conforms with that, basically you know you'll get it. And the locals know that if your scheme conforms with that, they know you're going to get it. There's no point in going for a judicial review or anything like that, because the rules are the rules and everyone understands them. In Ireland, we always seem to want to be able to fudge at political level and at planning level.
No, there's absolutely no doubt about it. We need more certainty. We need to de-risk the system. It does take, and what we're being told by international funders, what we're being told by international developers, is that it does take a lot longer in Ireland to get through the system, for want of a better word. And that's just not the planning system, that's the legal system, the judicial review system, and certainly the introduction of more certainty in that system would be welcomed, even by those that maybe want to object.
What happens, though, in our system is that someone applies for so many apartments, and then they get them, and then they want to densify the scheme, and they go in again. And if they knew what the rules were at the beginning, they'd either go for the denser scheme to begin with, or they'd know they'd no chance to densify their scheme, and they wouldn't bother. And that would accelerate everything. There are so many things that are stalled because of changes that people want to make midstream.
No, agreed, Pat. And we've had issues as well with different case precedent that has come out in relation to some of the challenges that has caused extra confusion in the system. So certainly a system with more rules or more clarity would be welcomed by everyone, I think. All
right. Anyway, let's hope that that clarity comes with the reform of the board and the planning regime generally. Conor O'Connell, Director of Housing and Planning at the Construction Industry Federation, CIF. Thanks very much. Eoin O'Broin, the Sinn Fein spokesperson on housing, joins us now and has been listening at least to the tail end of that conversation. Eoin, good morning.
Good morning to you, Pat.
Now, the headlines this morning all about unbuilt units that have planning, units that are stalled in on board Planola, and a demand for housing that is far greater than anything that the government anticipated in Housing for All, and I'm sure even Sinn Féin anticipated, up to 62,000 units per year.
Well, actually, the Housing Commission research that's reported in the Irish Times this morning really kind of, I suppose, is the nail in the coffin of the government's inadequate housing targets. But it confirms what most experts, many people in industry, and many of us in opposition have actually been saying as far back as 2020. Back at the very start of 2020, we argued at that point there was a need for at least 40,000 new homes a year between the public sector and the private sector. We've had 3 years of unmet demand and missed targets over that period. We've obviously had stronger economic growth in terms of jobs and I suppose new household formation within the population. Plus we have Ukraine and the outworkings of all of that. So for about a year and a half, I've been saying to government that they needed to commission independent experts to do an objective needs-based analysis, publish that independently, free from government interference, so we'd all know what the need is. And actually, it's not that government didn't anticipate this. When the government's own targets were being set using a tool called Housing Needs Demand Assessment, they explicitly excluded what we call pent-up demand, so the demand in the housing system that has grown over a decade of undersupply, particularly of social affordable housing. That was a choice that this government made at the start of their term of office, and therefore pent-up demand, particularly the undersupply of social affordable housing over a decade, was excluded from the target. So everybody has known the targets were wrong. I think what now needs to happen is, and obviously I haven't seen the housing agency's research, but as soon as it's possible, that needs to be published. And then the job of validating and updating that annually needs to be taken away from the department and the minister, given to an independent body, not unlike our housing completion figures. And we will have an objective assessment, not only of the total number of new homes, but within that, how many social homes do we actually need? How many affordable homes do we actually need? How many owner-occupier purchase homes do we actually need? Because it's not just about the macro targets. The government has also got the targets for social and affordable housing wrong. I'm blue in the face saying it. Hopefully, with this Housing Commission research, if the government does the right thing, finally we'll have an objective, independent needs.
Now, there is a problem.
We can work from there.
With the best will in the world, it seems that because of costs, because of labour shortages and so on, that we're kind of pumping out as many houses as we possibly can and as many apartments as we possibly can. The idea of trying to double that output is jaw-dropping.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the Housing Agency, or sorry, the Housing Commission research, should I say, isn't saying that you need to double it tomorrow. They're providing a range, and they're saying that range over a period of time is somewhere between 42 and 62,000 new units a year. So the range is what's important. You're absolutely right, there are constraints, but some of those constraints are not as difficult as people claim. The Irish Home Builders Association will tell you there is additional capacity to increase supply, and Conor outlined a variety of initiatives that could be taken, some of which I agree with and have advocated myself, to accelerate both the supply of private housing and public housing. I'm particularly concerned about the public housing side because we expect the private sector to have exceeded its overall targets under the government's housing plan for last year. But we know, for example, from the Department of Public Expenditure report that was published in the media over the weekend, that the government is about 80% behind on its affordable targets last year and 25% behind on its social targets. And there are very specific reasons which have nothing to do with labour shortages or money. They have to do with bureaucracy imposed by the Department of Housing. €1 billion of capital spending in the Department of Housing went unspent last year. Only 1,000 of 4,000 affordable homes were delivered, and only 6,500 of 9,000 social homes. So,
and you're blaming the bureaucracy, in other words, the civil service in the Department of Housing.
So there are three reasons. The first is there's absolutely no doubt, and this predates the last couple of years, but keep in mind government have missed their social and affordable housing targets for 3 to 4 years in a row. There is far too much red tape imposed both by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform and the Department of Housing on the delivery of social and affordable homes by local authorities and approved housing bodies. The very fact that at the time when costs are increasing, the Department of Housing has a capital underspend of €1 billion confirms that. But there are also other things. So, for example, with tens of thousands of vacant homes, there isn't enough action, particularly in terms of forward funding local authorities to acquire and refurbish those vacant homes for social and affordable use. Likewise, government have been talking for almost a decade about new building technologies, high quality, fully compliant with fire safety, timber-based building products. But the people who are providing those products aren't getting contracts from government, aren't getting the pipeline of work. So, yes, we do need to increase labour supply. There's no doubt about that. And there's ways of doing that through second-level education, apprenticeships, etc. But more homes could have been delivered last year than were delivered. And in particular, the public sector needs to shoulder its share of the overall output better than it has been doing to date. Yeah. 3 years of missed social and affordable housing targets.
Now, just
That's why homelessness is rising.
To clarify,
the
government and local authorities, I mean, they use private builders to do their building. There are no, builders' yards. There might be maintenance yards in the council areas, but no builders' yards where they actually have construction crews who go out and build houses. They use the private sector. The private sector is very busy at the moment. Where is the output going to come from? I mean, you may talk about how bureaucratic the whole process is and, the money's slow in coming through. But those builders are all building either for themselves or somebody else at the moment.
They are, but where the bureaucracy really causes a problem is in what we call the pre-construction phase. So if a housing manager from a local authority wants to build 100 homes, it can take 2 to 3 years before the builders even get on site. And therefore, if we want to be delivering homes, we have to shorten that process. Likewise, new building technologies, and these are being used in London, in Helsinki, in Paris, in Warsaw, elsewhere, where they actually manufacture the homes off-site, again, fully compliant with all building controls and fire safety. They can be manufactured much more quickly. We're not using those technologies. What I would also say is, in fact, vast majority of homes that will be delivered through the public sector last year won't actually have been where the local authority, the approved housing body, has its own land, its own planning commission and contracts in a private builder. They will actually be purchased off the private sector by private developers, either through turnkeys or Part 5s. And that is also a risk at a time of falling private sector commencements. So you're absolutely right. There's X amount of building workers in the country at the moment. But again, the Irish Home Builders Association, who represent the small and medium-sized building contractors out there, they're telling us that there is additional capacity to build more homes. We also have a lot of construction sector workers building the wrong types of things because of government tax incentives whether for data centres or for apart hotels or for co-living. And therefore, we also need to see changes in fiscal policy to ensure that the builders we do have, and we need to grow those number of construction sector professionals year on year, but the builders we do have building are building the thing that we need the most. The most pressing demand is for large volumes of genuinely affordable, good quality homes to rent or buy that working people can afford, and more social homes to tackle the homelessness crisis.
Well, clearly lots of food for thought in all of those housing headlines this morning.